I'm Robbin and this is The Breakdown. My friends, today we look back at past greatness. Some new, some old. Let's start with the recent brilliance of Khabib Nurmagomedov, one of the most feared ground fighters in the game. Against Michael Johnson, he put on a disgusting top game clinic. This artist is operating on his own level. It's a joy to watch. The Eagle's talons do work in the open field, but his real skills shine when he vaporizes space. Here, his right underhook works in tandem with his left leg lace. He'll fold in Johnson's right leg and go knee to cage, spinning Mike over the ledge of his thigh and steering hard with the underhook to get the top position. In the top position, he is aces. Eagle's a funny name for an animal that owns you on the ground, but when you're this good, call yourself whatever you want. He performed all kinds of magic in this fight, but there's one trick that made the fight world take notice. Watch here. Khabib clamps down onto the post arm and folds it into the body, collapsing Johnson. Then he vacuums away all space and feeds that post arm to his right hand. Dominant control. Now that motorcycle grip on the right wrist is only part of the control. He rides heavy on the left hip, clamps down hard on both of these diagonal anchors, and begins dishing out holy hell. Johnson posts back up, Khabib double grips the limb, then contracting his entire core, rips the wrist back in. Johnson's as tough as they come, fights to free the arm. Imagine the feeling here in the fire, getting flattened. Now extra pressure, head drives left shoulder west, wrist drags right arm east, pressure squashes hip south. There is nowhere to go. Is this new? No. This is an old school wrist ride, and it's as vintage as they come. You see, techniques in fighting move on and off trend like music or fashion. Think of bell-bottom jeans, the mustache, the mullet. They're new, then they become dated, fall out of fashion, then reappear again. The wrist ride is no different. September 26, 2003, UFC 44, Tito Ortiz versus Randy Couture. Round 3, a minute in a grinder of a contest. It's these classic fights that help us distill the truths of combat. When Tito's right arm is in position to trap with leg pressure, Randy snags the left wrist and dominates with, the wrist ride. Classic Couture. Control and crack. When we examine these vintage formative moments in the evolution of mat combat, we make connections with Khabib's modern game. Crucifix. Wrist ride. Old is new again. Super freaking cool. I wonder if we'll ever see Khabib pull out this technique. Bad boy. Bad Tito. April 19th, 2008, UFC 83. Matt Serra defends against Georges St. Pierre in Montreal. Although he had no collegiate wrestling experience, GSP became one of the great ground fighters of the era. And look what we have here. Forces Serra to 4 points, dominates the right hip and right leg, and you guessed it, works the wrist ride. Now, the wrist ride is not just a technique. It is an attitude, a philosophy. The wrist ride is a lifestyle. This type of ground fight requires an attitude of dominance, of destruction, of disintegration. There must be commitment to technique, yes, but maybe more importantly, a commitment to intent. The artist must resist the temptation of taking the back and hammer and hammer and hammer. August 7th, 2010, UFC 117, Anderson Silva defends against the bad guy, Chael Sonnen. Sonnen was an ornery sumbitch who never met a fist fight he didn't like. He had that ride attitude. For much of the fight, he did make it a rough one for the Spider. Now check this out, my friends, from the overhead view. Same principle at play. Owns the left ankle like a tyrant, but controls the core with diagonal pressure. Sternum and ribcage on right shoulder. Same concept. Then rotates counterclockwise to own the right side with hip pressure, and reaches through to ride heavy on the left wrist. Then you don't have to do much convincing to get Chael to pour it on. But you want to talk attitude? Credit Silva's heart. He survived 4 rounds of this and won this fight. Back to Khabib and his masterclass on the wrist ride. We now know, after looking at history, that working a wrist ride game is not new. In fact, not even rare. On most UFC cards, we see moments of the wrist ride, the leg ride, various other ride and grind games, and we see vicious damage from these positions. What is rare and special is watching Khabib take a supporting technique like the wrist ride and thrust it into a lead role in an award-winning performance like this. And remember, these things trend up and down like fashion, so think of the wrist ride like the mullet. What happens when the fight world sees Khabib rocking such a sweet mullet? A week later in Brazil, Ryan Bader shows up rocking the mullet too. The first moments after getting the fight to the ground, Bader starts digging for the wrist. Low pressure, head position, trying to feed his right hand. Single-minded and committed in his approach. Bader will not be denied. He locks up that wrist, controls their hips, and goes to work. This is how the fight game works, my friends. Good ideas, old and new, spread like a virus half a world away. Earlier that same day, Mousasi looks to avenge a loss to Hall. Gegard gets it to the fence and isolates the arm before taking it to the mat, controls the triceps, allowing him to drive him down on the shoulder point. Khabib's dominant performance a week earlier perhaps spurred all these artists to dust off the wrist rod and take it out for a spin, and Gegard can't resist. Right hand clamps wrist and draws it into the same side motorcycle grip. Squashes, controls the lower body, extracts the weapon. Position, control, intent, abuse, hammer, hammer, hammer. Khabib launched an old-fashioned trend, relaunched it. Gegard put his own spin on it, though, and expressed it with personal flair. He kicks his grip back, straightening Uriah's arm to flatten him. He also gets behind the left hip and under the right. Dominant. The best do not imitate. They take inspiration and then they innovate. And let's watch this type of ornery approach to combat in the coming months. And if we do, we'll need to thank Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov. We shall continue to watch him combine the attitude of the old school with the spirit of innovation to evolve the beautiful art of combat. Enjoy the hostilities, my friends.